Julio is Hispanic, not like some other white people whose parents thought it would be cool to name their kid Julio. Julio is a name for Hispanic men, and Julio is a Hispanic man. Julio thought about having one of those short haircuts like the other Hispanics in his neighborhood, but he didn't do it. He has long curly hair that always looks wet. Julio works at the movie theater near his mother's apartment. His job is to clean the theaters with two other Hispanic men. These two men are older and have been to prison for long stretches of time. Julio doesn't talk to these men all that often because he thinks all men who have been to prison are homosexuals. Julio felt good about himself this week because a girl who works at the theater and that Julio likes finally kissed him after work. He's proud of the fact that she's the third most attractive female employee at the movie theater. Julio's mother is single and always looks tired. She divorced Julio's dad when Julio was only 4. Julio doesn't see his dad very often, and now his dad is in prison for starting a fire in a public restroom. Julio's mother drinks a lot, but is still able to hold a job as a legal secretary. She usually goes to a bar near the office she works at the end of the day. One time, Julio's mother took a shit in the alley in the back of a nightclub because the line for the women's restroom was long and she couldn't hold it. Julio's mom doesn't come home till almost 9 at night sometimes, which leaves the apartment all to Julio. With all that freedom, Julio began getting into trouble. Julio began a sexual relationship with a woman with Down syndrome whose family lives 2 doors down the hall. The woman's brother found out about the affair and threatened to kill Julio if he didn't end the affair. Later that night, Julio called the woman with Down syndrome into the hall, and Julio spit in the woman with Down syndrome's face and told her to get away from him or he would kill her pet rabbits. Julio met with the theater girl after work the next day. They began kissing, and Julio, feeling intoxicated with aggression, pushed her head down to his genital area and forced her to perform oral sex on him. The theater girl was traumatized by the experience, and the next day the other employees in the theater had heard all about what Julio had done. Julio was told never to come back to the theater again or the police would be notified and Julio would go to prison and be turned into a homosexual. As Julio walked out of the theater, one of the older Hispanic men stopped him and told him that he knew a man in Texas that owned a car dealership named Manuel. He told Julio that if he could make it to Texas, Manuel would give him a job and let him live in one of the motorhomes on the lot. He bought a ticket to Waco, Texas. Julio arrived at Manuel's Trucks and Cars and More after a 17-hour bus ride. Julio was given the keys to a non-operational RV and was trained to sell vehicles. Manuel took Julio to a strip bar where Julio was given a pill by another man in a tall hat and told to stick the pill up his ass for the best high of his life. The pill turned out to be nothing but Advil. Julio had been fooled. He knew that he was going to have to wise up if he was going to make it in this new place. That first year with Manuel, Julio made $46,000. He was able to put a down payment on a condo. The condo soon became a party spot for several of the men that worked at Manuel's Trucks and Cars and More. They all had a code name for Julio's condo, which was Julio's Place. One night they all pitched in and got a stripper, and they all masturbated in front of each other. The next year, Julio was on track to make $51,000. He was feeling on top of the world. At the peak of all this, Julio was going through a gram of cocaine a week and going to Red Lobster almost every day. This is when he met a chubby but pretty nursing student named Faye. Faye came from a lower middle-class family. Her father had died of heart disease at the age of 38, and Faye's mother, Pam, was an airline stewardess. He began dating Faye, and soon the two were married. 4 months later, Faye gave birth to a baby boy named Henry. Two months later, a sad-looking insurance man named Sean approached Julio while he was on the lot handing out cigars to his coworkers. Sean, seeing that Julio had just had a child, sold him life insurance. Julio began making his monthly payments, which were not much since Julio was still a young man selling many trucks and cars. 2 months later, Julio tried heroin for the first time in the bathroom at work with his coworker Flaco. As time went by, Julio began to notice something funny about his child. Julio confronted the chubby but pretty nursing student as to why Henry looked sorta like a black guy. Julio soon found out that the real father of his child was a local speed dealer named Quick Bullet, whose real name was Steve. He left the condo and went to his coworker Flaco's house, where he shot up a large dose of heroin. He then made love to Flaco's male cousin Yossi in the living room. Disgusted with himself after the sex act with Flaco's male cousin, Julio got back in his car to drive home. Halfway to his condo, he lost consciousness and careened off the highway. When paramedics arrived, Julio was dead. The chubby nursing student went into a deep depression after Julio's tragic death. Henry had to be cared for by Faye's mother, Pam, who was a tall woman with thick ankles. Then there was a nuclear war, and everybody was dead. The end.